everything's a risk.
Yeah.
Even just the career path that I've taken is, okay, I got really comfortable in one zone and I got really good at it. But then I like upended and started doing toys, which I didn't have, other than the manufacturing side, I didn't know how to do characters. I didn't know how to make things fun. And then going to Smart, which is like, okay, that's traditionally more serious. If you're doing something super functional for OXO, like how do you do that? And I don't know. You just kind of have to trust yourself or not think about it.
Yeah, I think not thinking about it and blind trust in yourself, I think is a key, because that's exactly what you learn. That's the expectation is you can get pigeonholed, sure. Like tons of people do. But I think if you want to pursue that like all around cross-functional ID career, you need to get comfortable with just jumping and learning that specialty and learning fast and becoming a master at it like fast.
Yeah.
That's part of the job.
Welcome to Talking Design and Engineering by MakeLab. Insights and advice from industry leaders driving innovation and shaping the future of people, processes, and technology in the world of physical products.
Welcome. My name is Christina Perla. I am the host of the podcast Talking Design and Engineering. And with me today is Jake Brosius, Senior Industrial Designer. And I'm really excited to get into it. You've got a very interesting history. As we were prepping for this, I was like, oh, wow. I was like, I didn't take a lot of notes, but I was taking a lot of mental notes.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know. It's just my journey in design. So we'll see where this goes.
How did we meet? Did we meet via Katie?
I think what I remember is it might have been shortly after you founded MakeLab.
No. That long ago?
I think it might
7 years ago?
Maybe, I don't know. I feel like we had been like connected online for a while.
Oh, damn.
And then more recently, within the last year, I think Katie Lim had introduced us. So it was cool to have known you and then like actually get to meet and then have these like little interactions at design events and stuff like that. So,
and we've been like really leaning in on the events since we have more space now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think that's it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
When you go to so many networking events, like everything blurs together. I remember faces, but time, names, and all that blurs together.
Yeah, and like a year becomes like 2 minutes to get further in your career.
It's crazy. And we have Moo, who's our third unofficial guest, which is perfect because you did work at Bark for a little while. But we get start with like a little bit of intro. Tell us about your journey and like what you're about. And
I think most people probably, when they look at like my portfolio or things like that, they probably think of my time at Bark. I think that was probably the most prominent, whether it's just like through what I've put out into the world or just, I don't know. I made a lot of products when I was at Bark, so that's one aspect. But interestingly enough, I got started on my career in consumer electronics. So starting off working at iHome.
That's fun.
And prior to that, going to school at what was Philadelphia University at the time. It's now been merged with Jefferson, so it's got more of a medical focus, but still same program, same faculty, which is really cool. But I think that's like me in a nutshell. But then it's gone beyond toys and beyond consumer electronics. Dipped my toe into consulting for a while at Smart Design, which was honestly like top tier, like dream job as a college student, hoping to one day make it to work with OXO and some of the other amazing clients that they have.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What interested you about ID? I always love to ask this question. It's not something you're taught about in school. It's not like engineering, so you had to find it. So what was that?
I feel like it's because industrial design is like this marriage of like art, science, but it also has a little bit more of like trade skills of working in like a wood shop or things like that. And I always was someone who loved to build things. I think like most industrial designers, Lego was like one of the foundational elements. I'm still a huge fan of Lego.
Me too.
I have way too many. Kind of a problem, but it's a good problem to have. It's actually a really good investment, or it used to be. I don't know if it still is, but so I think that was like a big aspect of it. But I also, as a kid, it's funny because my mom recently brought up this story to me of when I was really young enough to be like in a car seat still. We were sitting in traffic one day and she was complaining about the red light and there was construction going on. And she's, I wish I could just get to where we're trying to go. I don't even remember where it was, but I remember early on wanting to actually be a construction guy, thinking
Really?
construction guys, they're the ones there solving the problem. They're the
Yeah.
ones there trying to make some sort of solution. And it's weird that now that almost feels like the first seed that then planted and then grew into the Lego passion. And then learning about the creatives at ILM was like a big aspect of it too, of these documentaries of blockbuster films and things being made and seeing the creativity that's going into it. The model building definitely was something that got me really excited and something I aspired to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gone all the way to in high school trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do for school? It just happened that one of my teachers, her son was an industrial designer. And I feel like that's also kind of part of most people's stories is you have to know somebody who's an industrial designer to get the in. And she was an advocate for me of, hey, like you really need to like get into this career. It sounds like what you're doing is pretty much what this would be. You should try that out.
Yeah.
And it just clicked from there.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar for me. Like I wasn't a kid that like took things apart, but I loved, like I would finish Legos in like one night. I would like finish games in like one night. I would just like figure out the strategy and just fucking tackle it. But yeah, idea was hard. It was hard to find. It was just luck, honestly.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those careers that it isn't defined by one thing.
Yeah.
Everybody in industrial design, we might have shared experience. We all have this tight network of everybody knows somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah.
But even that experience of people who are really close and have shared career experience, like that's still going to be very different once you move on to your next role and your next role. And I think that's probably most apparent, like within my experience of jumping industries and jumping the two sides of in-house to consulting and beyond.
So while we were prepping over like our talking points of what you told me, I think the jump start from college into your professional career was the Umbra challenge.
Yes.
And anyone that's a millennial should know, and went to design school should know about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was, I feel like for anyone who doesn't know, like it was this really cool opportunity when you're a young designer aspiring to get into the career, run by Paul Rowan at Umbra, one of the co-founders. And it was this challenge that was at most universities. I don't know if that's 100% true, but it definitely was at a lot of the top ID programs of the time. And you would have this challenge to design something that would then have the potential to be a product. And I was fortunate enough that I worked in that experience with the Umbra team. That specific year, it also was in collaboration with Target.
Yeah.
So we were working with the internal Umbra team, trying to figure out, okay, where's this design solution? And then we actually pitched it to Target as like the final presentation, which was probably, I don't know, you always hit these milestones. It is the most nervous I've ever been during a presentation. Yeah. Probably still.
You're like what, 20 years old, and who was in the room in Target?
It was. I think it was one of the like design directors and one of the like associate designers. Or something, God! Which to me was like, oh my gosh, this is like a real designer. Like I've never met a real designer before, other than my like faculty or my professors and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was your product?
It was called the Umbra Sidekick. It was a card, like an ID card holder wallet that also had this kind of like Swiss Army knife like attachment for keys. And it really was born out of, the brief was all built towards for students by students and trying to solve the kind of like entry-level college freshman, like what are those challenges that you encounter day to day and what's the biggest obstacle, and something obviously too that comes in at a really tight price point, which is this eye-opening moment as a designer of when you're making really organic and like cost and just like how do you make this marketable. And so at that time in college I had many different jobs and roles to get my way through, but one of them was being an RA. And so I had this network of my residents at the time and they were really excited. And so it was that first opportunity to get like that one-on-one user experience, build, test, learn. How do we get this thing better? What is it that actually is your pain point? Which was really cool because I had this relationship with them. They wanted me to succeed. It eventually did, which was really cool. They all ended up buying one.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was pretty cool. So I did that I think it was my junior year of school,
Yeah.
and it launched my senior.
Wow.
So before graduating, I was fortunate enough to actually have
You
a
had
product,
something on the
and
shelves.
that was, again, just like those moments that like
So
stand
cool.
out in the career of, I don't know if I could top that one. But
yeah.
yeah.
What was like the design process? Did you need buy-in from the people at Target? What was that like?
Yeah, I think like most design projects, they gave us a brief which
Yeah.
was that rough outline that I just spoke through, but there was a bit more as far as like actually finding the opportunity.
Yeah.
So doing a bit of a product audit, like what is it that is out there in the space that these students are buying? So what are the materials? What are the manufacturing methods that could be within the scope of a budget of someone getting their back to school
Yeah.
gear? But then there's also the other side, which I was touching on, of like the user experience and what is it that students struggle with the most? And it's, as being an RA, like students losing keys, losing IDs, having something that's like really compact that they could carry on them really easily, throw in a backpack. It's not like this huge thing that takes up their entire dorm room when square footage is a constraint there. And so like it was really like that was like the first part of it.
Yeah.
And presenting that back out to the team at Umbra. They had the relationship with Target. So they would give us the feedback as far as, okay, this feels like a good direction, lean into this concept, lean into that. And then from there, once I had the direction nailed down, it became more about, okay, how do I prototype this? How do I prove out that this specific card wallet, ID, keyring works?
Yeah.
And how does it accommodate some of those solutions? And getting it into the hands of my residents and users and being able to have them test it, having them break them, having them find all these different opportunities. I still remember one of the elements of it too was like documenting it.
Yeah.
You really want, at this point, like you're trying to figure out, how do I build my portfolio? And I went around and videotaped with the residents' permission, what is that experience? And we found there was like 3 different doors that you had to unlock with your key. In a typical like key ring, it's not easy to flip through all the keys,
Right.
figure it out. And having just a single key slot on the cart or the wallet actually made it more ideal for just like you get into the building, key
Got
in,
it.
which was like a really, I don't know, it's one of those things that like the user testing and user like
That's
studies.
the importance of research.
Yeah, because you could have the coolest idea, but
Yeah.
like those are the things that set a product from an idea and a concept and really set it off and have success.
I think that's like the one key learning, I think, for any ID person, right? It should be data backed. Like the data and the research should show you something. It should tell you the problems, and it should prioritize them for you as well.
Yeah.
You know, just by seeing the patterns. Which is
Like
really
intuition alone, intuition's great. I think that's one of the
Yes.
things that too, you have to be confident in like where your gut is telling you like, hey, this is a good idea. Let's feel it out. But I think the stats and the data that you can gather too, that's where it starts to challenge. Is this intuition, or am I just like really falling in love with this idea? Which is the one thing that'll kill a product, because like you'll fall so in love with it, you're not even solving the problem anymore.
Yeah.
You're just trying to make it your baby, and
Yeah.
it needs to live, and that's
It's
all
almost
I care
like
about.
art versus design.
Exactly.
That's like how I see it. And I think for the people that really do want to fall in love with their design, like there's other types of industries. When you're working in consumer products, it's all about problem solving. But if you work in like furniture, maybe that's where you can really dive a little bit more and get more attached to something. So you had to do all this testing, right? Like I have this cool idea. Here's a prototype. What are the edge cases of how it would break? You had to figure that out. Were you guided on that's what you had to do, or was that like self-motivated?
I think a lot of it was self-motivated,
Wow.
but I also think, and I'm not saying that in like any way of, oh my gosh.
No,
you're
but
doing
that's
something.
awesome.
But I think it was like most, and maybe it's just my experience of going to Philadelphia University, like the faculty, if they saw that you were pushing it, they would push you even further. And I think that's
Yeah.
what I love them most for, is if they saw that you were like just on the cusp of something, they were going to push you so that you could like find that new staircase and take that path
Yes.
or things like that.
Yeah.
Which I
that's
think is
amazing.
probably the hardest thing as a designer sometimes, of you can get so close to the top or like where that next opportunity is, but then you end up holding yourself back because it's a comfort zone thing. Or like I know one of my early mentors and the dean of the school was really adamant about looking at, okay, what skills do you have as a designer? Write them all down. Okay, don't do that for the next project.
Yeah.
What are the things that you need to get better at? And like constantly trying to find those opportunities of like, I'm up until recently, I'm someone who's avoided like keyshot and rendering. And
Yeah.
I could always do it, but it's just, oh my gosh, this is I would much rather sketch. That's my comfort zone. Like I could sketch this out way
Your sketches
faster.
are amazing, by the way. You should check out his Instagram. Like, definitely check out this guy's Instagram.
Thank you.
You and Katie have the best sketches.
It's like that toy design illustration influence. Yeah.
I feel like it used to be like cars were like the standard for ID sketching, but I feel like nowadays, like I see toys all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
I feel like it's that vinyl toy influence coming into industrial design.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I could talk about that forever.
I know.
But yeah, so it was like, okay, that's my comfort zone. I could sketch like the coolest, most activating as far as I put this visual on presentation.
Yeah.
It's going to get people excited. But I think now going further into my career, like a sketch can only get you so far when you're talking to somebody who's not a designer. They look at something that's meant to be like a stylistic choice of that's how I drew the shadow. And they're like, what's that spot? I hate that spot. And that's the whole presentation is, but can we get rid of that spot? And it's yes, that's just the shadow. Or it's like the most silly thing that like as creatives and designers, like you can see past that. Like it's more about the idea. But knowing that audience and having tools to make something look like realistic is super valuable for those types of like clients or potential like stakeholders.
And so with this, like when you were testing out the Umbra, what was the name of it? The Sidekick, and you were finding these things, did you have to then present it to the Umbra stakeholders?
Yeah. So, gosh, this is funny. Like thinking back, I think it's coming up on, I guess next year would be like 10 years.
Wow.
Which is wild since I actually pitched it.
That's
now
crazy.
I'm just like sinking into like that idea of, oh my gosh, 10 years since I did that.
You've come so far. Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
But yeah, I think there was like different stages of presentation. There was one aspect was like this blog that we would post a one pager for each concept. And you would have to encapsulate, this is the idea, these are the key features. And those features, they're almost more of what you could think of on an Amazon listing or something like that. Things that are just quick call outs for marketing. And so that was like the initial feedback loop, and we would get like critiques and maybe one or two like concepts for certain students would get like red lines or something like that from a designer, which was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
That's so interesting.
But I believe there then was like initial or additional like stages where we would then believe there was a video presentation at the midpoint, which was when everybody solidified like this is the concept I'm moving forward with to pitch at the final, and that final one was in person, and that's where like the higher ups at like they seemed like higher ups, they probably were just like associate directors or just like designers at Target, as well as Paul Rowan represented Umbra, who was there, and we actually did like a pitch and had prototypes, shared a lot of the like final looks like prototypes, which was really cool. And from there they went back, deliberated, and then picked, I believe it was 3 students that were finalists to like, that entered us into this like pool of, okay, now you got to this stage. We have to now make this like feasible. And there was critiques of the manufacturing. The wallet I did was in a compressed silicone. So from a manufacturing standpoint, it actually was pretty simple and luckily stayed very close to the original design. At the time, I didn't know all the constraints of what that actually meant, but it was nice that was a part of it.
That's so cool.
I guess that later stage, there probably was a lot more behind the scenes that I wasn't like privy to like that experience, but I did get like CAD render updates of, hey, we're doing a sample tool. This is what it looks like. We're excited to send you a sample or something. I don't know if I ever got that sample, but like it was like cool to still have the video and be like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be real. And all my family members, my mom she wants a copy of everything I've ever made, which is
so sweet.
Which with the dog toys, it's crazy how much she's stayed to that.
She has a whole room full of
it's probably like in my like childhood closet, like just bins and bins of stuff. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Like no joke, she's my biggest fan.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so amazing to have that support system.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I think that like pretty much, and I think too, like I might be skewing it now having more experience, but for the most part, it was that like end to end, like coming from an idea, but then selling it to then be a product.
Yeah.
But not getting that full exposure to like the behind the scenes of working with engineers, working with the manufacturers and things like that.
But still, you got a really good, I mean, they had to compact this whole program into something that was like, you know, they wanted certain outcomes, and so they had to really design the process in a way that really de-risked not getting that outcome. And it seems like you got a good breadth with all the feedback and like the marketing feedback from the get-go. That's a lot of real life. The deliverables and like how you communicate those things might look different in like in the professional world, but it's great to know that ID doesn't, to reinforce and to have that reinforce that ID doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
Because that's the key to this career.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're always working with somebody else. And it's always going to be like, no one knows where, what I picked up on all my conversations is like, some people just don't know where to place ID in an organization. And so that's like really great experience to have. That's like half the battle, I feel.
Yeah. And I think too, it's one of those things where I've never spoke to any friend or other, even just other creatives that have to wear so many hats of like, and I feel like
professional jugglers.
Yeah. Like I had made a post about it and I almost want to like at some time poll and see what are the craziest jobs that you as an industrial designer have embodied, whether it's sometimes we're researchers and we have to be like real researchers, not just, oh, I like Google search something and this is what I saw. No, what does that mean? Can you like put this in front of somebody, get them to react to it and then decipher quantify it. But then also being like a product photographer, like being able to like actually do good product photography, but then also having to
video.
Video or interviewing or there's so many different roles and it just fascinates me that somehow we all seem to manage like without imploding.
And without instruction, like we like dive in head first. Like the comment I've gotten from this podcast setup, and it's pretty low key in my view, but I had to do a lot of this at Pratt. And so just, get a mic set up, get a little MIDI controller, get the cameras. But people not from ID are like, wow, this is so professional. And I'm like,
this is just work.
This
is a passion.
Just another day.
That's why I love my job, kind of.
But it's crazy. I always say the one thing you learn from an ID career is you are just so multifaceted. You become like Swiss Army knife.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like what I've loved the most about it, as far as I'm someone who loves to be like, yes, I love to sketch. And I think that's like an aspect of being very hands-on, but I love to be hands-on in other ways of actually physically prototyping, like whether it's through 3D printers or just taking the like box that my Amazon package just came, or like that package and like cutting it up, taping it together, adding it to another product and being like, if I put a handle there, like how does that feel? Because like you can always like fake things to a certain point in a sketch, but once you start to get real, then it introduces so many more challenges. And the sooner you can do that, the faster you can get to that like final deliverable.
It doesn't have to look pretty.
Yeah, it shouldn't look pretty.
It shouldn't, because if it does look pretty, then you're spending way too much time on the wrong focus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that it's so fascinating to me to hear about all this, because before I started doing this podcast and like really getting into it with people, I was like, I know between Manny and I, we're both industrial designers, like we can do a lot, like we can like very quickly, but just hearing it from others is like, wow, this is a thing.
Yeah, we're all doing it. We're all struggling. Just like heads down, let's figure this out.
You become the photographer at a corporation. Like at Converse, I was just doing, at some point I had to photograph a lot of these bags.
Oh my God.
Just to do it, but I knew how to do the lighting setup. I knew they were great.
And it's a skill that's super helpful, like whether it is like for something like this, like having the lighting to video something.
Yeah.
Or it could be transferable to actually setting something up in a rendering software.
Yes.
Knowing, okay, I need this type of lighting.
Yes.
I need to have something overhead to just illuminate the space. Like those are all skills that I think most experiences can also transfer and help.
And it helps too, like you know how to direct as well. And I think that's really important, because like wherever you go, if you go up the ladder and you become a creative director, like you're not doing it anymore, but you need to know how to vet talent. So you need to know a little bit about the technical stuff and the know-how. And then if you're ever like on scene, like doing a shoot, for example, and it's your creative vision, you need to be able to know how to communicate that. So it's so multifaceted.
It's like all those skills that, again, you wouldn't learn in school, but then you learn on the job, and then they're vital to the job.
Yes. And then you become a really valued employee and team member if you know how to assert and do it and let people know you know how to do those things.
Yeah.
You become really important. It's really helpful. So then you went to iHome.
Yes.
Which I think all millennials, again, we probably know this brand, who didn't have the dock.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a like an icon that if you didn't have an iPod, I feel like there's maybe like a few like who had older siblings that like it went down and I don't want this anymore. Like I got a smartphone now. You can have this. But yeah, iHome. That was honestly like in the moment, it was not a job that I was like super jazzed about. I was excited to get my real job out of school.
Any job will do right now.
And I guess too, it's good to note, like I started there as an intern.
Yeah.
It wasn't guaranteed that it was like a 6-month internship with the hopes to go full time. And I feel like that's one of those like initial like entering, like getting that first job is so important. And for me at first it was like, oh my gosh, this is an internship. I didn't achieve what I was supposed to achieve by going to school. Like I'm in so much debt. What am I doing?
Yeah.
But luckily enough, like going there, getting the experience, like really having everything flipped upside down from what I just learned in school. Oh, you think IDs, this is actually what it is.
Yeah.
And like, it was like just being thrown into the like frying pan and like figuring that out, which was really great.
Crazy.
And then eventually transitioning to full time.
What was the team like when you entered versus like when you were full time?
Yeah, so I was the youngest on the team. iHome was like a smaller company.
Yeah.
They did have a pretty robust design team as far as, I think when I joined, maybe there was 10 designers, including there was 2 directors and then 2 kind of separate teams that focus. Like one team, iHome has a pretty robust, even to today, like hotels business where they do all the alarm clocks that are in hotels, have the wireless charger on top, have all the like different accessory plugs
I
for
love those.
like hair dryers and things
so
like
great.
that. Yeah, so something I didn't know going into it. And then there was the team I was on, which was at the moment, I probably would have classified it as like more blue sky. These are like new sub-brands that we're launching. So I worked on their beauty brand, which was all these vanity mirrors, but taking the idea of, okay, the iPod dock, which the iPod, it's good to note that this was the end life of the iPod. It was slowly, the iPhone was out, everybody was getting iPhones. The speaker in the iPhone was better than what a Bluetooth speaker at that time was offering. But so taking that same idea of what are things that could be married together in a way to create a new product. And the vanity mirror was like the ideal because it had the electronic components of the lighting and really getting into the intricacies of what creates good lighting, what's the good like ergonomic kind of positioning for things like that. But then having Bluetooth capabilities of, I'm getting ready for my evening. I want to now listen to my favorite like playlists and things like that. So worked on that. They had a brand called Zenergy, which was getting into more of, again, lighting, but from like the blue light, red light kind of wavelengths and thinking through, okay, is there a way to incorporate like mood lighting or creating an alarm clock, kind of what Philips had done at the time. I'm blanking on the name of their like alarm clock, but taking that same philosophy and doing it at a lower price point for the everyday consumer. And then doing other kind of like fringe, still iHome, but like my favorite product I worked on there was their first product without audio, which was like crazy to have iHome be this speaker company. But it really was around the idea of, if you no longer had a world with the iPod, what is the new iPod, which was the iPhone? The iPhone has all these capabilities that we would never be able to do in like a $59.99 price point. And so what is the new like innovation here? And at that time, they introduced the wireless charging. It really was more about this home base for your phone. And so it was like, you see them all the time now, but it was a wireless charger with an alarm clock built in. And it wasn't necessarily an alarm clock as much as it was just like a visual display. And so you had kind of this like work desk scenario that you could be charging your phone on the side of your bed.
Yeah, which are so prominent now.
Yeah, so that was like my favorite product that I got to work on.
Yeah.
Which I think also leads into some of the other stuff that we were just talking about of like teams.
Yeah.
And the value of not being just an industrial designer, but being able to work across teams. That product in particular, we were pushing really hard that this thing needed to be very minimal.
Yeah.
It needed to be sleek and it needed to I guess every industrial designer wants the ID to be first. It was one that like when we were going into more of the technical specs of it and like the engineers are coming back with the proposed housing of how much this thing is going to grow.
Yeah.
It went from being this essentially wafer thin kind of wireless charger to being what we considered the ice cream sandwich, which was this like beefy, it just was very beefy, something that didn't look super like elegant or would blend into kind of its surrounding on a nightstand. And I think this was like one of those moments that I continuously reference back whenever I'm having trouble with another team member in a different discipline. The engineers were pushing really hard. Like, we can't source the components. Heat was a big issue. How do we mitigate that heat? As well as just like the scope of wireless charging at that time was like every 6 months, the like wattage was changing. So they didn't know what they would have to build for in the future. And they wanted to future proof it to do running changes throughout the coming years. And so like for that, it was like, okay, what is the biggest issue that we need to solve here?
Yeah.
And it really was heat. And what that actually led to was more of the like CMF, but also material specifically. Like at that initial concept, it had a rubberized like pad to be not slip, all these things to keep your phone safe. But what it resulted in is we ended up doing it in a fabric. And what that allowed for is the entire surface that was wireless charging was then perforated. And then the entire bottom was perforated. And it allowed for the airflow, and through like quick mock-ups of just like using Arduino boards and kit bashed like electronics, we were able to prove it out. And then it looked exactly like the initial concept. The materials were different, but we would have never come to that if it wasn't the engineers doing their job.
You're right.
And I still look at any time I get into any sort of like challenging discussion of, it's not really an argument, but it's just, okay, they're not just saying this to say this. Like, there's a reason they're doing their job.
Yeah.
How do I do my job?
There needs to be a mutual respect.
Yeah. And I still, I can't think of another moment that was that critical on a product.
Yeah.
And then led to the success of the product.
Wow. That's so crazy. How many engineers versus how many ID on that specific? And then what other roles were on the team? Yeah,
so in that, it really was like we had one mechanical engineer or one head engineer. I guess that would be like 2 engineers.
Yeah.
Myself as the industrial designer, my director, and then we had an in-house electronic, which was really cool too, because they were able to help us build some of those early prototypes that I don't think I would have had the capability to be like, let me take this existing wireless charger, just cut all these things off the circuit
board. And
then
rewire it.
And just rewire it and not burn out the board and cause some sort of explosion. Yeah. But yeah, so it really like it was nice there because it really was, there was one person in each role. There was obviously someone more senior kind of overseeing it, but myself as the junior designer at the time, and then I don't know if the engineer was a junior engineer, but the engineer also got to own it. But then we had the oversight of more seasoned experience.
That sounds like a really good and solid team. And if you have the mutual respect of one another, this is my specialty, this is what I can contribute, this is what I'm not good at, and that's where you come in. If the team is put together really well, that makes all the difference.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, that experience in particular stands out, but that role and kind of job that I had at iHome really was like the foundation of what I feel like was like my second education. Was like, okay, I went to school for 4 years to learn about ID. I can do ID. How do I like learn about and appreciate engineering and manufacturing and sending comments to a factory to make sure that in-house we got everything looking great.
Yeah.
But now how do I tell somebody that we need to change something when they're about to cut a tool that's going to cost like thousands and thousands of dollars?
Yeah.
That was not my forte. I'm like confronting somebody and like telling them like, hey, this is wrong, but not like just saying it outright, but giving them a little bit more context of like, hey, we need to update this because some sort of grounding element, whether it's like a design principle or that's not the original intent or something like that.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
And do you find that there's always this pull between ID and engineers, right? It's supposed to be like this fight. It's like this whole thing. Did you feel like you might have been open to that, but did you feel that the engineers were open to ID?
I think they were great, specifically like the engineering director.
Nice.
He was someone who he would always tell, but if you could prove it to him, like whether it was through another product, which was something that I had never thought of before of, like industrial design, we have to be solving problems with new ideas.
Yeah.
But you can also just look at existing products. I think the biggest thing was like the way like tooling was done. Like, we can't do that. It's like, why can't you? Like, I've seen it here and show me. And then I would have to go buy the product, tear it apart, sit down and have a meeting with him. He's okay, we can do it. And he would always like, I forget how he like, he had a tally of like how many times like I would push him to where he didn't want to go. And he would be like, yeah, like 27. And it's pay up. He would always ask me, you owe me. Like, where's my bonus? It was so funny. And I learned so much from that experience. And I don't think I would have done it as much pushing back as much as my director and manager at the time wanted me to. He was like an advocate of, I would have the epiphany idea of, oh, what if we did this? And he's like, go talk to Thomas. Like, he's the one who's going to tell you yes or no. And that was such a daunting experience.
Wow.
I don't want to talk to this director. Like, he's going to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're just like pre-anticipating the no and the rejection. But that's really important too, I think. Like we were talking in prep too, just talking about like the buy-in that you need. We learn a lot about presenting in ID school. And I think we don't know exactly where it applies. Like, you don't know where to apply that coming right out of school, but it's really in things like this. And it doesn't have to be this big formal presentation. It's literally just convincing somebody that this is the way to go.
Or like a napkin sketch or like the existing product. That all you have to do is just place the Amazon order and expense it. Like, I guess that's a luxury if you could do that. But it's not that hard. It's all about communication.
It is. And it's getting past that, oh, he's going to reject me. It's, I actually have legs to stand on. Right? I have what I'm about to say, what I'm about to present is actually makes a lot of sense. And just believing that's half the battle.
Yeah. And I think that was like, it really was like a new education.
Yeah.
I had been there. So I started as the intern and then I stayed on for 2.5, 3 years. So it really was like multiple products, having products that you pitch and they don't go anywhere, having products that hit and then they have to change because we hit some sort of challenge in the production or we hit some sort of like a buyer doesn't want to purchase it anymore, which is a huge aspect of design that I didn't understand as far as, you can make something cool, but how do you convince somebody to put it in their store?
Yeah.
And like they're very specific asks and being very, controlling over what the actual final product was. Like, where's this coming from? I'm the designer. Like, but at the end of the day, it's never going to be a product if you can't like please them and get them on board.
So true. So true. So important.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That sounds like a really great experience, like coming like your first real experience.
Yeah. And
great
I think
environment, a lot of great mentors and advocates pushing you in the right ways. Oh man. So good.
And that's where looking back, like whenever I initially was going into it, I don't want to do consumer electronics. And then coming out of it, oh my gosh, that was, again, a free education. I got paid to do it. I was a junior designer, but like I still got all this like other incentive that then led to my next job, which was Spark, which was so cool.
And okay, so let's dive into that one because I interviewed Katie, who is your boss, right?
Correct, yeah.
And she describes Bark in such a similar way. It was like she came in at the right time of its like startup trajectory, making tons of product, had to build a team, like so much great experience.
Yeah, and I think so. Katie had been at Bark 2 to 3 years prior to me, so she had gone through what I would assume my experience was coming on with the existing team. So she was like that first team, but then we were starting the sub-brand of Super Chewer, which was its own new team. And I think the craziest thing about that is coming out of school, not wanting to go into consumer electronics. I really had this passion of starting with Lego. I want to do toy. I did my senior thesis on play and toys as well. I want to get to toy. How do I do it? And it just so happened the summer before I had applied at Bark, Katie was running I believe it was through Advanced Design. They used to do different kind of pop-up presentations and have talks and things like that in New York City. And she was doing a workshop. And so I was like, oh, I follow Katie. I think she had been on another podcast or just through Instagram. I think at that point, like everybody was finding the designers of that time and fell in love with her illustration style, all the products that she had done at Kids 2.
Yeah.
And just being like, I want to learn from this person. She's got it figured out. She's more so just wanting to pick her brain.
Wow.
And so I went to that workshop and we were able to talk design. Like many designers, everybody's quiet. And myself, I'm not somebody who's extroverted and wants to go and start conversation, but I knew that was like my one opportunity. Didn't know if I was ever going to get to talk to her again. Okay, I'm going to pick her brain. Had some really cool like lessons of like how to even just do eye placement on characters. Like to that point, I'd been doing consumer electronics and not character design, which is very different. And like learning that experience, getting that foot in the door. And then it just so happened later that year, we both were speaking at that time, it was Jefferson had purchased Philadelphia University and they did a annual tandem design conference. and we both were speaking at it, which was really cool. And at that moment, she was looking to have designers on her team, and from there, ended up being her first like hire, which was really cool.
So cool.
But never thought that was where I was going.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I think it's one of those moments that I also like reference more from networking of stepping outside of my comfort zone, getting to know these people that want to share their experience and like help others get to that level. Yeah, it was really cool.
So she described the amount of products that you needed to like design and bring to manufacturing like per week. I forgot the number, but it was something very like a lot. Like
it was like, so we did a monthly subscription box.
Yeah.
And every month there was 12 to 14 new designs that were launching.
Wow.
And that was mainly because of sizing, but then also we did specific tailoring of some dogs that are super chewers want really hard toys because they will destroy anything else. But then there's other dogs that it's just like, no, they just eat the fluff and I don't want them to eat the fluff.
Yeah.
So then you're doing like the rubber squeakers and things like that. So yeah, it was quite a bit. And especially I still think back to when I joined and being, how did just like the two of us, and quickly other designers joined. So it wasn't like us the whole time.
Yeah.
There's a huge team of, I think it was, I'm sure she has a better number, but like it grew and grew.
Yeah, she described
but
like,
it's just,
I think at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Crazy.
It's insane.
So how was it going from a really wide audience base, like client base or target customer base in consumer electronics to dogs? Yeah. What even kind of research do you do? Were you always a dog person? Did you already know? Like, how do you human to dog?
Yeah, and I think
that's kind of crazy.
It's such an interesting design experience when you can't talk to the user. Like, you literally can't ask them what they want.
Yeah.
Like, okay, do you like this stick? Do you like this? Okay, you brought me this. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're eating it. You're not supposed to eat it. Like, all these different things. And I think it's really unique in specifically pet, but it's similar to, like, children's toys of you have the chooser, who's, like, the parent, the owner, and then you have the user.
Yeah.
And so you're tackling the design challenge from both of those angles. Like, all the aesthetics and all of the like cuteness that Bark kind of embodies in his products, that's really not for the dog. The dog could care less if it looks like a little fluffy animal or just like it has a really great squeaker.
Yeah.
And I think that was what was so cool about Super Chewer is it really was like industrial design.
Yeah.
From, okay, we have to create something that's engineered that a dog will not destroy this and they can chew through bone. So we're screwed on this one. But yeah, and so like that, but then also how do you get something that entices people to like, it pops. And I think what was super unique about that space is like nobody was doing it. So anything you did could really be like crazy innovation.
Right.
And I think too, that's like the thing with that space is like most spaces that get disrupted is it's like there's not that much you have to change. It's just changing, like pulling the levers in the right areas, solving the right problems at the right time, failing, which is a big part of it too. Of, okay, we launched this, it did not do well. What do we learn from that? Talking about that with the design directors and things like that. Moo has an opinion on that. He's like, toys aren't good.
Moo, come. He gets a little protective sometimes. There's someone else. Sometimes the building's used in the weekend, like by the tenants. And so when I'm here alone sometimes and Manny's not here, he just, his guard dog comes out.
He just cares. He loves you.
He does. It was like perfect time talking about Bark. But did you have a lot of let's just watch dogs?
Yeah. From like that's where like we had to play with dogs.
Yeah.
We called it play testing. Like we would just like get the toys, whether it was existing or we would do later on in development like sample molds.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the unique things about dog is you couldn't do those quick throw together prototypes because
it had to be all out.
Yeah, it had to be all out, had to be more of a commitment. And it's also just that safety risk of I'm going to give my dog a 3D print and then now they have like splinters in their mouth or some sort of toxins from the plastic. That's not great. And a lot of the casting silicone, things like that, isn't also safe. So that was a big challenge. And definitely we had to read into things.
Yeah.
I think it was more of because we were putting out so much product, we would test through that sometimes of, okay, we have 14. What if we did something new with one of them? And we did it in like the minimum like impact of like order quantity or something like that, which cool. I think is probably riskier than most companies would want to be. But I think it led us to so many discoveries and iterations, and then eventually doing what we considered like the core collection
Yeah.
of this embodies everything we've learned, but non-thematic, which was unique.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I feel like everyone that was at Bark at that time, I just feel like it was like this thing. Like it was like a career defining moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, once I left, of so much of my identity was Bark, and
Yeah.
so much of what went into those toys, it really was me and defining me as a designer of, okay, now I have experience, I'm getting a little bit more exposure to the larger design community. People are recognizing me for designing dog toys,
Yeah.
which in some aspects for me was like, oh, I don't want to just be the dog toy guy. I want to be a designer. I want to be like all these other things. Yeah, but there were so many other like aspects of that role too, of the character design and the thematics. Like everything was like around a theme, whether it was the like kind of easy low lift of a holiday, but even getting deeper into those of, okay, we could do pumpkins, we can do like all of those things that would be synonymous with Halloween. But what if we did candy for dogs? Or what if we like, what would that be if we like took that thematic and like, how do we convey that world and like all these different things through the product? Which was such a cool entry way into not just designing a product, but designing a story and a narrative through the experience.
Would you say that Bark has such a personality of a brand, and so much of that it's just so woven in? When you were designing products, who gave you did you guys come up with the directives of we're going to do a Halloween theme versus something else, or did that come from like the marketing, like?
Yeah, so there was I guess, like creative director at the time who actually came from like the animation and kind of that side of the like creative space, which was so cool and refreshing to have this still somebody that you could like really have a good conversation and do these like whimsical things, but would push you in ways that like other industrial designers just wouldn't be like in a brainstorm of adding wacky things to the characters, adding like wacky props that might be provocative in one way, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But it really pushed you out of your comfort zone in a different way that like I haven't found with other industrial designers. But yeah, they were the ones that were like leading a lot of the initial, and towards the tail end of my time at Bark of like getting into different roles and growing into a senior designer role and like actually leading the box at a point when it got so big that there's just like, okay, Super Chewer has a subscription, but there was also this time when it was building out to do retail. And so like having to take on a lot of more responsibilities and owning that and like being the lead on the team and directing people, which was a whole new experience and was super challenging. But I forget where I was taking that. But yeah, I think it really was just like this crazy experience. And really that's where it came to of like, we would sit down and like pitch ideas and do these like wacky stories. And
that's so cool.
Yeah.
It just re-emphasizes the importance of the entire team. I think that defines a lot of the success of an industrial designer is like, I think bringing in someone from a completely different field makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, depending on where you're trying to go as a company.
And the leads there too. So we had people from like DreamWorks, and that's animation. Nickelodeon. We had a ton of directors and leads that were from that space. One of the creative officers worked at Lego. So there were all of these like things that essentially equal fun, which is like in different facets. And then when you mix it all up, you get these different like concoctions and exciting.
That's so fun.
So,
wow. That would have been so cool to be in that room. And then especially when Bark gets cheeky, really, really, like I've noticed that the brand really does a good job of keeping up with those viral short trends. That's so cool.
Yeah, they always have been on top of it. I think it really was the unique aspect of like how fast they moved.
Yeah.
Because no one else was putting out the amount of product they were. For us to throw one more product into the whole assortment, it was just like, okay, like that's like a drop in the bucket. Like it's gonna be this cool marketing moment.
Sketch it up, let's do it.
And stuff would happen organically too. Like so many of our products, like for me, one of the ones that sticks out is I had done like this kind of like great white shark ring tug. And for me, it was really cool because I was doing character for the first time and integrating like design features with these character features. And it was just like, I figured it out. I can do this. I can design toys. But then whenever people got it, they just took it and just put it on their dog's nose and made these like really funny Jaws-esque moments of like, my dog is bigger than Jaws. I don't know. It's still one of those designs that just sticks with me from that time specifically. Cool. But yeah, so some were planned, some were not planned, some happened organically.
Isn't that like so validating though? Like you design something with one intent, and then you just see people like take it to a whole new level and like build on top of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sure it happens with other products too, but it's just like with dogs and toys, like there's more of this like posting and being social with it.
Yeah.
Where I'm sure people were finding cool ways to use my alarm clocks and vanity mirrors, but it's just no one's gonna just be like, look at my hack, and people are gonna be like, yeah, that's cool. I have one too, or maybe I don't have one. Like it's just a mirror kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. But the playful makes it really easy to makes it very shareable.
Yeah, for sure.
And so then from Bark, you went to Smart.
Yeah.
And so how was that transition?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit already. I think at this point in my career, I was starting to feel like I'm only this dog toy guy.
Right.
And I've literally had hundreds of toys produced because of the model that they had. And that was great in having that exposure. But I think too much of my identity was going into it.
Yeah.
And I felt like I needed to break that up. I knew that there was other things that I was seeking. And the thing I fell in love with at Bark was that storytelling. But the storytelling at Bark was so much through the thematics and like the actual product narrative. Smart is one of the leaders in just like storytelling in general. And like, how do you sell ideas? How do you get somebody who isn't a designer or somebody who's never even paid attention to design and just wow them? And I think that was what really drew me to many other things that Smart embodies. But I think for me, it really was that like, okay, I have one facet of storytelling. How do I become an even better storyteller?
Yeah.
Like if I could put these together.
Interesting. It sounds like you're dealing with more people not in ID and you're pitching them ID in general, not just your design. Like you're their entry point into thinking and being inspired.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, just like something that's always good for designers to be like cognizant of. Not everybody in the room is a designer. And again, if you're just doing these really cool illustrations, that one person you're pitching to, they might just want it to look real so that they understand what's going on. And then you can talk about the idea. And I think that's where Smart really pushed me, both from that aspect, but also having to take all of this experience of in-house and now working as a consultant, where not necessarily doing the same thing every day, not necessarily always being a designer on a project. That's where like some of these like product photography aspects of, hey, we have this need for marketing. Your allocation is free. Can you help us? Yeah. And having to just jump into it, learn this whole crash course of photography, lighting, all of that, amongst many other things. But yeah.
What is and you were at Smart for?
Just about 2 years.
Yeah. So if you can, what was your favorite or what's a product that you worked on at Smart that like really stood out to you?
Yeah, so nothing has officially launched. So I can't go like into specifics on the products, but I can say one of the key aspects of my role and my time there was owning OXO. This is the bread and butter of Smart Design, one of the unique kind of use cases of the history and just like the innovation. But so I had this opportunity to work with OXO on many different products. And I think that was really cool. Almost going back to that first experience of working with Umbra and Target, of getting to know the user, really diving into that, doing tons of testing, tons of prototyping, tons of anything you can think of in that early stage to just even get the brief built. Because a lot of times you don't always get a brief. And sometimes you get a brief, but it might not be the right direction. So how do you find the right direction and how do you navigate that space? And I think just that was probably like the biggest thing in that collaboration with OXO, which was really cool.
That's awesome. And how many products would you say? Ballpark.
There's quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah, because they put out a lot too.
They put out a lot. It's good to note that OXO does have like their own in-house team. So I guess another aspect of this is like having worked in-house and now working consulting. The structure of a Smart project team would be like a designer, a director, project manager, and maybe a few design engineers, which is also a really fun aspect of Smart. Yeah. But then you're also working with OXO's team, which has a project manager, a director.
Interesting.
Like all these
more buy-in.
Yeah. And ultimately they're the client. So you have to really navigate that. But I think having those experiences in the past gave me those tools to then understand, again, they're the ones at the end of the day that are investing in this. So how do we make them happy, and how do we show them and communicate these are the needs and these are what users are wanting, and selling that through concepts, selling that through just any form of data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So is it correct to say that a lot of times most of the people you have to convince and get buy-in on the design are non-designers, but in this OXO case, you are also convincing engineers and designers?
Yeah, I think it's just everything is layered. Okay, we're convincing the immediate team. We could all, like, there's going to be discussions in between the Smart team and the OXO team.
Yeah.
Like, how do we come to common ground? You then go to the next level, and you have to get to everybody aligned, and then you go to the final sign off, and it could derail the whole thing. It could be, okay, we've been aligned this whole time, and you're still aligned all the way to that point, but then someone all the way at the top says something, and it changes the entire project, or it changes the entire goals, or as you're doing the project, life is going on and business is changing. And so you have to also adapt to the now, which might not have been the case when you kicked off a project. Yeah, it's a lot of, I don't know. I think that's where moving quickly is super beneficial, because the faster you can move, that momentum builds up and you can't really stop it. When you start to sit on something and you start to allow that room for questioning, questions are good, but sometimes if it's yes, exactly. So we need to keep that momentum going, keep the excitement going. And so much of product is timing. You could have a really great idea, but imagine if it's right before the pandemic and then everybody's at home, but it's something for an office, and the timing is you can't control it, but seizing a moment, which I think Bark we did a lot of, is so key, and it's so true to other product development as well.
It's so true. You're so right. People trends change all the time. There's things move too fast. And then with the introduction of, they have fast fashion, I don't know what they call it for product, but fast product, we're just evolving. Our behaviors, our desires, what we want in our surrounding environment changes so quickly these days.
Yeah, it's like the drop ship product of, hey, this is already designed by a factory, I'm just going to slap my label on it and then put it out there. That was actually one of the reasons, as I was in consumer electronics, I started to get more passionate about it. But what was happening is that was the front end of that, Bluetooth speakers, unless if you were top tier Apple, Google. This was the voice assistant era too, when that was all launching. Yeah. Unless if you could do something where you weren't charging anything except the cost to make the product, you couldn't compete. Yeah. And so seeing that, but then I think now it's seeped into every category. Even pet, quickly after we would design something at Bark, there would be a knockoff really fast. It didn't happen as often within the rubber toys, but plush, all you have to do is give them something to a sample room. They replicate it, change it up a little bit, and then it's in the market. Crazy. So, got to be fast. You got to be.
How do you which brings me to another topic altogether. How do you protect at that point? And is it worth protecting? You know what I mean? Because protection only goes as far as your ability to enforce it. Yeah. And so you can get the patent on it. That doesn't mean it's done.
And I think that's where resources is big. If you have an entire department, that's what they're focusing on, and you have these lawyers on retainer, you're going to use them. And I think that's one of the great things within certain businesses of OXO. They protect a lot of their stuff because there is a lot of cool innovation there to protect. But I think the other way to do it is really, and maybe others feel different, but through branding. Yeah. If you don't have compelling, that story again that's the brand. What am I buying into? What lifestyle? What experience?
It matters a lot.
It matters a lot. And I think if you're just putting out something that does something well, that's when it's gonna get copied because people want it.
You're right. It's got to be fully involved.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's something that's becoming more and more of a conversation. So many people that I hear stories of, I launched this really cool product and they're so cool, especially within the fidgets and stuff like that. And then a week later, they're being knocked off.
That's
and
insane.
There's hundreds of knockoffs. You look at it and their product doesn't even show up on Amazon anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I think it really is resources. And to me, branding would be easier to control as a designer than something that's in the legalities of, okay, we patented it here, but what about internationally? And then, I don't have the budget to do that, or I don't have the time to wait for a patent to be approved and it's just pending. And I don't know.
Wow.
Everything's a risk.
Yeah,
even just the career path that I've taken is, okay, I got really comfortable in one zone and I got really good at it. But then I upended and started doing toys, which I didn't have. Other than the manufacturing side, I didn't know how to do characters. I didn't know how to make things fun. And then going to Smart, which is, okay, that's traditionally more serious. If you're doing something super functional for OXO, like, how do you do that? And I don't know. You just kind of have to trust yourself or not think about it.
Yeah, I think not thinking about it and blind trust in yourself, I think is a key, because that's exactly what you learn. That's the expectation is you can get pigeonholed, sure. Like tons of people do. But I think if you want like to pursue that like all around cross-functional ID career, you need to get comfortable with just jumping and learning that specialty and learning fast and becoming a master at it, like fast.
Yeah.
That's part of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like I don't know if it was like when we were talking before we started recording, but like one of the aspects too is you have to like be measuring like these different aspects of your career.
Yes.
And that's always going to be changing, whether it's like, I would put bark in the category of this is something I'm really passionate about and I love this job.
Yeah.
But there's other things that start getting pulled as far as the amount of energy that it's sucking from you. And now I don't have a personal life, and I'm not saying bark took away my personal life. That's where I probably have some of my longest friendships. And,
oh wow, that's
and
good.
It's so cool going back to like initially meeting Katie. Like now Katie I consider one of my best friends, which is really awesome.
That's awesome.
Definitely a great mentor to keep looking and aspiring to.
Katie's awesome.
But yeah, like those things are always going to be in motion, and your like experience in your career, but outside of your career, are always going to be pulling those in different ways. So you just have to embrace it. Like if that's
cool.
where it's moving, that's what you have to do. But then there's going to be another point in time where, you know what, like dog toy design was actually not that bad, and I didn't have to, not that it wasn't effort to get things across the line, but it comes more naturally because I did it so much.
Yeah.
And you have to lean into that a bit more. So
I think you're just like proving all the points of why I continuously say industrial designers have the potential to be the best entrepreneurs, because it's so much of it aligns. You have to jump, you have to learn, you have to do everything, wear multiple hats, know how to convince people. Like all the skills align. It makes so much sense. But that's so cool. Yeah. That's so cool. What a cool like career journey. It's only 10 years in, right?
8, 7,
8? Yeah.
8.
Yeah.
I guess if you go from like when that product launched, like closer to 10. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's
hopefully more exciting stuff to come.
Yeah, it's only up from here.
Yeah. Hope so.
Yeah. Any last words that you would want to share?
Yeah, I think like now, I guess, so I'm no longer at Smart, exploring this new, like probably more close to the entrepreneurial side of design. But
Super
setting
fun.
out, yeah, so relocating cities, like now being in Philadelphia to be closer to friends, family, all the benefits that provides, but then starting to now do freelance on my own and starting to explore what does it mean to be an independent designer, and starting to build my own narrative of what do I represent, and taking all those experiences. And it's still in process. Like I would say it's like, if I was like doing ceramics, like it's still not visualized exactly, but I'm starting to map things out. But I think given everything else that I've experienced, like again, taking those risks or like following that intuition, this feels like it's the next thing. And so far it's been great. Like
I love that.
It's been busy, but it's also like exciting, and it gets me, I want to get up early every day to jump on my laptop and start working for these clients.
Nice. That's
it's
a good feeling. That's how you know.
Yeah, I get so sucked into that too, which is probably unhealthy. But
I'm trying to unlearn some of that for myself.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if it's just because I've always had like multiple jobs and like juggled different things, but for me it's like further into the thick like of it, like I'm just like, this is it. This is so fun. And then like, why am I so tired? Like, why is my head hurt? Oh, I haven't eaten today. Like I should probably like address that.
Literally, I am the same way.
That's where it's great to have such a supportive partner.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
like
awesome.
Someone who keeps you in check and
yes.
is really great at calling you out.
Yes.
When, like
Much
things are getting
needed.
really unhealthy.
Same.
But,
and having a dog helps too.
Oh my gosh,
because they need to be walked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They need to run it out.
I was at a presentation yesterday, and my dog Obi has a bed right at my foot of my desk.
Yeah.
And he's just like resting his head on my knee. And I'm like talking to this client, and I'm like, I can't just say my dog's here right now, but I really just want to pick him up and like cuddle him and love him and stuff.
Yeah.
But he ended up dealing with it. But yeah.
That's super cute. Oh, that's so exciting. I literally had no idea you came from Philly today.
Yeah. I'm sneaky like that. Yeah, no, Philly, like, I'm excited to see, like, Philly does have a smaller design scene. It definitely is tied into New York, being geographically so close. But I'm excited to explore that a bit more too. Like, they have, I don't know if you're familiar, like Urban, like Anthropology, like their headquarters is there. So a lot of my fellow classmates, like that's where they ended up finding their careers. And then there's a lot of stuff too within the medical space, like Jefferson, which is a hospital network. And university, that's what ended up merging with my school. So there's a lot of that, which is like a cool space of, again, helping people in new ways and making these things that are not great experiences better. So we'll see what the future holds, but that's definitely really exciting.
Yeah. That's so exciting. I can feel the energy and excitement. It's a vibe.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's just, I feel like a different person, which is cool.
Inspired.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the most important part. I really factor that in. I need to feel inspired. Otherwise, what am I doing? Yeah. Honestly.
I mean, it's a hard space to be because I think as someone who's creative, you're constantly wanting to do things and you're constantly wanting to follow what everyone else is doing, like whether it's posting on social media, whether it's, I don't know, maybe starting a business. Like other designers are starting to do that more frequently. And it's like hard to not feel like the FOMO of I need to keep up and I need to do this. But it's, I don't know, in this moment, I feel like I'm focusing on the things that I need, which is, and I guess like the immediate needs of like my household, which is, it's really fun. And it's also a problem solving activity as well. So. Oh,
that's so fun. That's so fun.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And like doing this we talked about it months ago.
Yeah.
And the timing just ended up being perfect.
Yeah. Thank you for having me as well. It's great. And I think we'll probably be doing business as like my projects keep picking up. I'm going to need some prototyping. I don't have all the capabilities.
Where to find us.
Yeah. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining and listening in, and have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to Talking Design and Engineering on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, or follow MakeLab on social media for the latest in on-demand 3D printing services.